social and no political interest should stand in the way of the truth. That would be the antithesis of all that I stood for in journalism.
You look back on that Sunday Times and you admire the courage of the man, and he blasted open some of the legal challenges to journalism in ways from which we've all benefited.
These children exist in the real world, and we mustn't be put off telling the public about the plight of the children.
What we all learned from Harry is that a single investigation did not deliver.
That was Harry's greatest achievement, I think, to change British law in favour of press freedom, in favour, give more power to the powerless.
If the task of editing is to be anything, it is to edit text. If it's to sign expense sheets, I don't want to do it. And if you've got the pictures of the Queen, they're very depressing pictures, I must say.
I hope you feel the love tonight, Harry, because there's so many people in this room who loved and admired you, and many who you wish you had known, but who you would have loved and admired. So always makes me a little bit emotional when I see that video. But nothing would have given Harry greater pleasure than to know that his esteemed alma mater, Durham University, and his journalistic lodestar, Thomson Reuters, had joined forces with me to lift up all those committed to, as he put it, finding out what the bloody facts are. And nothing would have delighted Harry more than hearing from our next guest, David Thomson, chairman of Thomson Reuters. David learned the journalism industry as a child, beside his grandfather, the great Roy Thomson, whom we just saw in the video, and his father, Ken. David's lifelong support for the profession is based on the Thomson principles of journalism, set out so clearly by his grandfather Roy, who said, "I do not believe that a newspaper can be run properly unless its editorial columns are run freely and independently by a highly skilled and dedicated professional journalist. This is and will continue to be my policy." Harry and David often talked on the phone about the need to be brave, to go to places nobody is talking about and bring home the truth. A great bond between them was a love of photography. David's photography collection is one of the world's greatest, and a number of his close friends are world-leading conflict reporters. David, like Harry, cares enormously about young journalists, like our first Sir Harry Evans fellow, Wayland Cunningham, whom you met earlier, and whom David made a point of meeting up with when he was last in London. David is the journalist's friend. Neither the fellowship nor today would have happened without him. David, over to you. Okay, sweetie.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, honored guests. I often say I'm humbled, but I truly am humbled as I stand here. Honored, and Tina, I would like to say that you're pure inspiration. Harry adored you. There was a bond between you and Harry, and you could feel it in the air. You know, you lifted one another to heights. And, you know, today we talk about anything in life exceeding expectation. This has soared beyond anything that I could have imagined. And I think I speak for many. And thank you. I would like to just take a minute and acknowledge a very, very special individual. Don McCullen is seated right in front of me. Don, you... No, I know, but I will get to Roy. But I want Don to just recognize you. I want to tell you just how much you meant to my father, to my grandfather, and to all your colleagues at the Sunday Times and beyond. Your photos are remarkable. Please forgive me. I will drift into my grandfather and Harry, and I'll start with my grandfather, whom I first met as a very small little boy. My father would take me out to Mississauga Road, and I remember on one occasion he left me alone. I'd have been 5 or 6, and my grandfather, formidable figure, was reading quietly. You know, CBC was playing, and I sat there for a very long time. But it made me wonder, what made this man tick? And I would later ask my father, what was it like with Roy growing up? And he admitted that he rarely saw him, because Roy, when the day was finished, would walk home, but he'd walk to other homes because he wanted to understand what happened in his community and the joys, the sorrows of friends, of advertisers, of everyone. And it's interesting, you know, on a Scottish television, my grandmother, whom I never met, passed away from cancer in 1954, and he decided that he would leave the North American newspaper empire and come to the United Kingdom. And he settled in Edinburgh, and Scotsman, and Scottish television. And what's interesting, of course, we've all heard that extraordinary line in which he says buying Scottish television was basically taking a license to print money. But if one reads the local press throughout those early days, my grandfather was concerned about one thing in particular: how to get the radio signals into the Highlands. It was the customer. He did the same thing with classified advertising. How could you go deeper? How could he penetrate and serve a need? So growing up, I heard tales of the Great Depression from my father. I heard them from my grandfather. And it was clear the hardship, but the hope, the struggle, and there'd always be a human tale, poignant, and not entirely about suffering, about heroism. And when we moved to London as a young man, my father took over the chairmanship of the Times. My grandfather would stay with the family in London 2 days, sometimes 3 days a week. And it was marvelous. And Isabel, when she was talking about breakfast with Harriet, it made me recall those mornings. They were brief, but they made a tremendous impression. And the energy that between my father and my grandfather, that Harry was there. He was the silent companion that they would then meet later in the day. And it was clear to me that there was something really remarkable between, particularly at that time, my grandfather and Harry. And my favorite story, amongst many, was the Labour minister, Richard Crossman, and the diaries that came into the hands of the Sunday Times. And it was a struggle, but at one point, the presses are ready to roll. And Harry went to see Roy, and he said, Roy, when that button is pressed, you should know the consequences could be grave, and you could lose the paper. And my grandfather, he smiled, and he said, Harry, that's one hell of a story. He was willing to put whatever he had to on the line because he believed. He believed in Harry's leadership. And if you were to ask me, the really most extraordinary element was how Harry infused in human beings this belief in themselves. How he took talent and incubated, extended, lifted them in directions that they could probably never have imagined. Is this not the legacy that all of us crave? Whether it's with our children, whether it's with colleagues, whether it's viewing from afar the achievements of others, this is truly what matters. And I know that for my relationship with Harry, he gave me something that's very difficult to put into words. He infused a belief that whatever you set your heart and your mind to, because in the end, as Don says, pictures, it's not looking, it's feeling. And we can do that. It's powerful. And his light flickers for me every day. And I'm certain it flickers for all of you. And I just feel blessed. And I feel that today, the triumph is that all of us must surely feel a greater sense of liberation. That whatever task is on hand, whatever our aspiration or dream, that we can achieve it. And we can achieve it, we can also achieve it collectively by sharing, being open, being honest. But never, ever allowing your moral compass to be taken for granted or misaligned. Steve admirably expressed the commercial dynamic, and it's real. And I think, Steve, you'll have to probably peel me away at times, but the responsibility for taking care, for supporting, for believing in our journalists, our photojournalists, and other photojournalists and journalists. All circles in life are tiny, and we need to share one another's stories, our impressions, our feelings, because we have a formidable task in having good people thrive and believe in themselves and assist them where we can, because my goodness, they've assisted us. Their courage, their passion, their belief in doing the right thing in face of far beyond confinement is almost unfathomable. but it's real and it's human. And I don't know about you, but I come away today wondering how much harder we can push, how much deeper we can go, and how many more hearts and minds we can touch. So thank you all, and it's been a real pleasure to be with you in this atmosphere that I will hold for the rest of my life. May we have many, many more. Thank you all.